Hey everyone, how's it going? I hope you're all doing great and following the 3H's of the channel. And in this video, it's all about encounters that happen in the deep woods. And not to overhype, but while recording all these, I got sick, so that's how terrifying they are. So pull up a stump and let's jump into it. Thank you for watching. So this is something completely bizarre that happened back in the early 90s when I was a kid. I shared a room with my grandpa. My grandpa worked for a Freightliner, so there would be several times throughout the month that he would be gone and I would sleep alone. This wasn't a big deal. Our room was pretty large and it had 2 twin beds and a nightstand in the middle. His bed had a window above it that saw into our backyard. Now in our backyard there was a whole bunch of trees, but there was one tree in particular that was bigger than all the rest of them. So one night he's gone, I roll over, still half asleep, and I can see out the window, and I'm seeing something that's standing by that big tree outside. This particular night, it was a whole bunch of wind and rain. All the trees were swaying in all different directions. And then I see something when my eyes adjust. At first, I thought it was just the tree's thick trunk swaying back and forth. But after a few minutes of trying to go back to sleep, I realize that it's not the tree. The best I can describe it is something with a 4-foot long neck, hence the tree trunk shadow. I noticed it because after a few minutes of swaying back and forth, I saw it bend its neck like it was looking inside, and when it turned its head, I saw that it had 2 horns and some kind of long snout or beak-looking thing. After laying there terrified, I did what anybody would do. I rolled over and squeezed my eyes closed, hoping to fall asleep. The next morning, I go outside and look for the tracks, but of course, there's nothing. I go to sleep that night with the curtains closed. I wake up the next morning. Gramps is back. He tells me that he brought my cousin last night, and that he's going to stay the weekend with us. I go to the living room, and my cousin is there already, with a bowl of cereal, watching Kids WB or whatever. He slept in the living room. After a few episodes of cartoons, I tell him what I saw the other night, and what I saw in the window, and he freezes and asks, did it have a long neck and this weird-looking snout or beak? I could feel the color drain from my face. My cousin says he saw it looking into the living room from the front porch before turning around and waddling off. To this day, neither of us have any idea what we saw, but the fact that he described it in perfect detail to what I saw still scares the hell out of me, and it's the reason that I always sleep with the curtain closed, no matter where I am. So this didn't happen to me, it happened to one of my friends. They were at Massey's Wood in Dublin. This place is at the base of Montpellier Hill, the famous location of the Hellfire Club. He was looking for the ancient Celtic wedge tomb with his dad. So they find the tomb. It's pretty interesting, but obviously really ruined by this point. They look around the forest at the remains of the old Massey Estate. They find the remains of the estate's ice house. Despite it being the middle of the summer, he can see his breath in the air. The ice house is falling into the small river. There's a dark tunnel that you can just about crouch into. He does so. He looks in. It's just a pitch black tunnel. After a few minutes, his dad calls him to leave, and he says, okay, sure, just give me a second. And he continues to look in to see if he can see anything. By this point, his eyes were getting used to the darkness. Way back in the little tunnel, he can now see what looks like a small figure, almost like a large child. It's pure white, it's crouching, and it's looking directly at him. For a second, he freezes, and then the figure smiles at him. He immediately comes back to reality, turns around, and runs out of the area. I've never been there, so I can't say either way, but it was still creepy to hear about. So this is something that happened when I was 14. I was living in Elkin, North Carolina. My older brother Tyler is 16. We're quite close. We had a whole lot of woods behind our property, and it went on for what felt like forever. So it was Christmas break. All the trees are dead, and the ground is really thick with leaves. We go out for a walk, like we often do. We don't talk a whole lot because we can't hear each other anyways over the crunching of the leaves. We get to this old creek that we notice is slightly better groomed, so we're thinking that this is maybe in someone else's private property, but we're not entirely sure. It's not very deep, but a few yards wide. It's a sandy creek bed. There's leaf clumps by the banks. We're about 15 feet from the water. Tyler is balancing on this rotting log, telling me a story about something. I'm standing nearby. It's windless and chilly. The sky is overcast, and I suddenly felt uneasy before anything even happened. Then there's a noise across the creek that sounded kind of like a footstep. Tyler stops talking. The noise comes back, and we see some leaves kick up on the other side of the creek. It's like a little puff of leaves, just kind of exploding upward a little, with a crunching sound that you'd expect. It's hard to describe, I know. It keeps happening across the creek, with maybe like 2 seconds in between crunches. Each crunch is a few feet away from the last one. There's some animal over there playing in the leaves, says Tyler. A mouse, probably, that's routinely jumping for some reason. But it's also somehow covering a lot of ground between jumps. We hear more crunches, and Tyler falls silent again. The crunching comes toward us in a line and reaches the creek. There is silence. We watch the far bank to see what it is. Seconds pass, and then there's a crunch on our side. We think it's gotta be a wind vortex or something. My heart is pounding. I haven't moved. And then we hear another crunch. I'm staring at the spot, really looking for something in the leaves. And then another crunch happens, and Tyler's gone. My heart stops. He's gone. Vanished. He's not on a log or anywhere. He was there just a second ago. There's nowhere to hide with all the leafless, skinny trees, and if he touched the ground at all, even really far away, I would hear it. I can't stress enough how there's no way that he could have disappeared that quickly. I think he's been taken somehow. There's a crunch right in front of me, and before I can react, my legs are already running. I have no idea if I'm being chased, or if I'm still being chased, or anything. I'm just running for my life, trying to get back home. My chest is killing me, but I can't stop running. I have never been this scared. I'm looking around wildly for Tyler, but he's not anywhere. I should have seen him. I get to my backyard, where Mom and Tyler are both waiting for me. I think, thank God he's alive. They look terrified. They're asking what happened, but I can't even breathe enough to explain. My lungs are frozen. Tyler says that you disappeared. There's a lot of confusion. Apparently his account is that the crunching stopped right when the thing crossed the creek. I remember a few more crunches on our shore, and that suddenly I vanished, and that he freaked out and ran. I insisted that he disappeared first, and then I ran. They had been waiting for me for minutes, according to Tyler and Mom. I think, what? That timeline makes no sense. Why was I that slow getting back? Mom says we both got spooked and ran at the same time, but that still doesn't explain how he got back so fast. There's lots of talk. She gets pretty worried about us because of how scared and freaked out we are. We go inside to get warm. I take a shower to try and clear my head. Me and Tyler talk about this non-stop for months. It becomes a whole thing where we finally build up the courage to return to the creek half a year later.
but we don't find anything. Nothing happens. I don't tell a whole lot of people, and I gradually started downplaying how scary it was to my friends that I did tell. But for some reason, it was very emotionally scarring and very strange. We moved away a few years later. Sometimes we still reminisce, wondering just what the hell happened. I have no idea, but as far as I know, nothing like this has happened to anybody as far as I've heard. If you have any theories, I'm all ears.
I used to go visit Grandpa outside of Bozeman in the winters. Grandpa was this tiny, frail old man, but he was super hardy. He used to take us snowshoeing up in the mountains and carry most of the gear in his sled that he pulled behind him. It was bone-chillingly cold up there. Your snot would be frozen before it left your nose. The times he did convince us to go out, we ended up staying in ice caves that Grandpa had carved into the snowbanks earlier in the winter. It got dark really early, and of course, no campfires because there's ice and snow everywhere. One year, we're out there camping with Grandpa, and he's really on edge this whole trip. We don't ask him why because we are stupid kids and we don't think it matters. He has random outbursts, yelling at us for not tying a knot right, yelling at us for not keeping up with his insane pace. He stops hiking at about 2 p.m. Nightfall isn't for another 3.5 hours. Me and my brother exchange looks to each other, wondering what's going on. We look around for his ice cave. There isn't one. We call out, "Hey Grandpa, where are we camping?" But Grandpa is nowhere to be found. We can't find his footprints, which is strange because snowshoes leave enormous footprints that you just can't miss. We backtrack and re-follow the trail to where we were earlier. The footprints just end right where me and my brother were when Grandpa told us to stop for the day. After a lot of deliberation, we decide to head back, following our tracks back to the main road, where we will somehow flag down a car and get help to find our Grandpa. We hike for about an hour back the way we came, and suddenly we hear a voice. "Where the hell have you kids been?" It's Grandpa, and he's pissed. He says he was hiking along, and all of a sudden turned around, and we weren't there. He says that our footprints just ended 100 paces back from wherever he was when he realized that we were gone. We tell him that something similar happened to us, and we had just hiked back 2 miles down the trail. Suddenly, he goes into wild animal hyper-alert mode. He stops talking. His eyes are now scanning the forest around us, his head pivoting side to side, almost like he's trying to see everywhere all at once. We get freaked out. My brother starts crying. My Grandpa won't respond when we ask him what's wrong. He's quietly muttering incoherently to himself. After what seems like forever, Grandpa starts moving again. He simply says, "Follow me," and we do. We're too scared to argue, but he's going in a third direction, i.e., not where we came from and not where we were originally headed. We're all hiking close together, literally stepping on each other's feet. We can't hold hands because of the ski poles, but we would have if we could have. Eventually, we emerge in a clearing. I recognize it as a lake, but you'd never know it in the winter when everything is frozen solid and desolate. We get out onto the ice and we walk all the way to the middle of the lake before we stop. Grandpa tells us to get out our parkas, as we're going to be staying here a while. We ask him what's happening, but he still doesn't answer. He gets out the binoculars and starts to scan the shoreline. This is a pretty huge lake, so without binoculars, neither me or my brother
could really see anything besides little distant trees on the shore. At this point, Grandpa puts the binoculars down, unpacks a fairly large caliber revolver and holster, and puts it on his hip. He then picks the binoculars up and points them in the same direction he was looking a minute ago. Me and my brother both look in that direction. I can barely see something moving around. No, a couple of things, all of various sizes. They're all hanging on the bank though. None of them leave the thick brush surrounding the lake or venture onto the ice. After a few minutes, Grandpa silently hands me the binoculars. When I look at the movement on the shore, I almost grab my pants. There are 3 animals. 2 are what I can only assume are wolves, maybe coyotes, but I don't think so. The bodies are too long, almost snake-like. The 3rd animal is some sort of all-white thing, standing on 2 legs. The more I look at it, the stranger it seems. At first, I took it to be a bear, just standing there on its hind legs. Then it begins walking, pacing around, really, and the legs are just too long and slender to be a bear's. I sit down on the ice. I lean up against my backpack and get more steady grip on the binoculars. I slowly realize that whatever it is has the approximate build of a human, but the head is clearly not a human head. It's some sort of animal. I can't place it. I ask Grandpa what the hell I'm looking at. My brother snatches the binocs away, and when he sees it, he labels it a bear man, and he wants to take a few shots at it. Grandpa says that the Indians used to dress up in animal furs in order to blend in with the animals they were hunting. For a second, I'm not afraid anymore. It's an Indian in a bearskin who's just out hunting, and he has 2 dogs that look like wolves, and they're following us, but are afraid of the ice. I start being afraid all over again as I realize that this is about 100 times weirder than a real bear man. It's starting to get dark, and we're still out there on the ice. We're all watching the whatever the hell it is, bear man, and his wolves slowly wandering along the coastline, clearly avoiding the ice, but clearly trying to get out onto it somehow. Every once in a while, they'll change direction, as though they were pacing back and forth. In the time that I have the binoculars, I see the thing and its dogs or wolves motionless and staring directly at us many times. No one breaks the silence for a long time. When it gets too dark to see anything on the shore, Grandpa relaxes, puts down the binoculars, and actually starts to make camp as though nothing had happened. Of course, we don't have a tent, but we do have sleeping bags and bivy bags to keep the blowing snow off of them and the wind off of our faces. Me and my brother look at him like he's crazy. He says, "We're going to sleep out here." I say something along the lines of, "What about that guy, that thing? He's right over there." It doesn't matter. We spend the long night in that exact spot. The next morning, we can't locate any animals or bear men after 45 minutes of scanning the trees around the lake. Grandpa deems it safe enough to head back. By now, and since he knows these woods so well, we take a different route back to the main road than the one we took to get here. After 1 mile, he's doubling back, staring at the mountaintops and measuring angles between them with his arms, and I'm convinced that he's lost. In the next moment, several things happen all at once. With no warning, a huge moose gallops out of seemingly thin air and almost crushes my brother, managing to push him on the ground. Grandpa collapses for some unknown reason. The 3 of us form a triangle, and in the middle, is a slender person covered in all white fur, like a polar bear, and with a bear head, or maybe a mask, but it looked pretty damn lifelike. The two wolves, I'm sure they're wolves now, are circling at a distance, or rather, one is circling. I don't see the other one. The bear man lets loose a scream like you imagine Bigfoot might make when caught in a bear trap. Grandpa half sits up, points the revolver, and fires off 3 shots at the thing in rapid succession. A huge puff of snow, like a silent explosion, and we can't see anything for a few seconds. Now, a second moose comes hurtling through, and after it's gone and the snow has settled down, the bear man is gone too. No traces of blood to be found. We can still see the one wolf pretty far away, but it's still circling. We proceed to book it out of the woods, taking the shortest and most direct route off of the mountain. We both thought that Grandpa isn't really sure about where he's going, but nobody gives a shit. We have to keep moving. I was still thinking that I could see the wolf out at the edge of my vision, several 100 feet through the trees, or maybe it's both of them. We eventually do get back to Grandpa's car. It turns out that he did know where he was going. It's been covered in fresh snowfall since we left it there. There's 10-inch paw prints all over it and around it. We clean off the snow, and we see that there are dents in the hood, like hail fell on it, but they're right under where the paw prints were. On the drive home, we swear to never speak of this to Grandma or my mom. We have to swerve out of the way of a huge roadkill, and we almost drive off the road. We stop just in time. The thing on the road is a huge mound of fur with no distinct animal-like forms. There's no head, no legs or tail, blood everywhere. It looks like a giant skin thrown over a mountain of flesh, and then it moves. Grandpa peels out and drives home 30 over the speed limit, and we never look back. So, what'd you think of those? Let me know which one was your favorite one down in the comments. Do you have one of your own? As always, I have an email in the description below that you can send them to if you'd like to. Also down there is a PayPal and a Patreon if you would like to support the channel that way. And with that, I think I will see you in the next one. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, be sure to like and subscribe. And I will put a couple other videos up here that you might like. If you've seen them before, maybe you want to watch them again. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Have a good week, and thank you for watching. Thank you for pulling up a stump.